So welcome everyone to an evening of working class poetry and music. Excuse me. So, what is working class poetry and music, you ask? Well, our poets and musicians tonight are going to give that answer. April has been designated as National Poetry Month, and the Battle of Homestead Foundation likes to celebrate each year with a program featuring some kind of program with local poets and musicians. One of the founders of our organization actually was a well-known poet and a visual artist as well, Peter Oresek. Anybody remember Peter? I think this, yeah. Well, I was going to give a whole little bio thing about him, but just say he was a great professor at local universities, Pitt, CMU, Chatham, and he edited two really landmark anthologies about poetry and labor. One was called Working Classics, Poems on Industrial Life, and the other was For a Living, The Poetry of Work. And to his memory and all the other founding members, we'd like to just dedicate this tonight. Is anybody here for the first time not know what the Battle of Homestead Foundation is or does or anything? Or we need to go through that a little bit? Well, this foundation's been around for 30 years. It was folks just meeting together to talk about labor history and labor arts, and they just kind of stayed together. Now we're a nonprofit. Basically, it's a group of workers, educators, historians, community members, and the mission is to use the lessons from the 1892 Battle of Homestead and connect it with things going on today, such as the strike of the Post-Gazette. We have a reporter here from the Pittsburgh Union Progress.
Thank you. Welcome.
John Sanford, and we'll be taking a collection for their efforts later on. So basically, the idea of the foundation is trying to use history to try and talk about what's going on now, to try and empower today's workforce, build strategies for the future work, especially for young people. And we tell a people's history, historical events told from the viewpoint of the workers and the people who, as the saying goes, do most of the working and paying, living and dying, art telling and story making in the world. And actually, again, does anybody really not know anything about the Battle of Homestead? Because it really started right here, and this is why we always like to kind of have events in this space. It's kind of hallowed ground to us. On the morning of July 6th, a boatload of about 300 mercenaries came up the river, and they were going to essentially force the workers to either go back to work or go away and have strike breakers come in and man the factories. A pitched battle ensued, and the actual first casualty of that battle happened right here in the pump house. There's a man named John Morris. He was an immigrant from Wales. He had a wife and a small child, and he was one of the lookouts on this building on the roof, and a sniper got him right in the forehead, and he fell all the way from the roof all the way down 60 feet into the basement of this building, and he was the first casualty. There were many more.
So Larry, you may want to mention Wednesday's breakfast.
Oh, that's right here. To tell you how history connects. So that was 1892. This brave immigrant mill worker dies, trying to keep the community going. And his great-great-grandniece is a woman named Shannon Forrester. She will be here in Homestead with us next Wednesday morning at the Eaton Park. Pretty much every week, Foundation members meet over at the Eaton Park down the waterfront there. Stop by about 8 o'clock. Ms. Forster is going to speak about 9. She has a lot of research that she keeps uncovering about her family and what happened to them after 1892. And again, it's kind of that living history. And it's free. You just, don't even have to buy a lot of food, just enough to keep them happy and let us meeting there. But we've been doing that again for a number of years, so stop by anytime on a Wednesday. I guess, we're going to start out with some music. Robert Walicki organized this, and he proposed this program. And incidentally, anybody here that has and anybody who wants to propose a program that has some relevance to labor history and our community in Western Pennsylvania, you can do that. Just email us or go to the website. We've got a little proposal form. Robert did that and said, I want to have some working class poets. And we said, that's great, and we think we'll add a little working class music too, and that'll make it even better. So that's what we have tonight. And it's interesting, when the Battle of Homestead happened, it was covered widely. It was international news. I mean, it's essentially a workers' revolution for a couple months, and it had massive coverage everywhere. But it was, again, kind of the mainstream media, kind of glossed over the surface. So what it turns out, the real stories were being told by the local poets, local songwriters, not only in English, but in other languages as well, the many languages of the workers that were here. Some of those actually have survived. A lot of them were just actually posted on, walls in the community, passed around, sold for a couple cents a copy to raise funds for the strikers. And then some were sung. I think the Homestead Strike is a song Pete Seeger did, and that was actually from 1892. Vivian Richmond did a recording, a lot of people, Joe Glazer, I think. But most of that, unfortunately, that people's history, poetry and music, it did not survive. But we still have it. We still have poets like Robert Walicki, Robert Gibb, Paula Corso, Jason Irwin, and Kelsey Jumper and Danny Rechtenwald to keep telling those stories today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kelsey and Danny, and they're going to play some music for
you. It's an honor to be here tonight, and we'll dovetail right with some Pete Seeger here. This next song, I had the privilege of getting to perform at the Carnegie Museum of Art when they had an exhibition called Working Thought, which I assume a handful of you made it to see. This is our own take on it. Had it been passed around in a chapbook and it came to us, this is what it would sound like.
Whether it's really affecting.
Yeah, we'll all do it together. Come on. not only to celebrate love and to sing about things that are beautiful and bright and that we celebrate in song quite often, but also the danger, the warning, right? The method that we have to communicate what we need amongst ourselves, and the fact that we can't always do that. You can't just call it like it is sometimes, right? We have to find ways to communicate really powerful messages amongst ourselves in quiet ways, right? Thanks. This next song is a tune by Tracy Chapman. I think the chat goes. And Tracy Chapman is kind of her most famous songs, like Fast Car and like Give Me Just One Reason, are these love ballads, but Tracy Chapman's whole catalog is full of these amazing protest tunes. And it's interesting right now, 35 years after Fast Car had her big moment, that is having an even greater moment and at the tops of the country charts, and she's now become one of the first, I think the first Black songwriter to win this Grammy department. But it just took a young white guy to get her there. But she's laughing all the way to the bank, and we're here for it. Yeah. So you make a little money off somebody else's sweat. So some people start wondering why you got fat, oh you got fat. So you grind and you push and shove and claim that those most worth get what they deserve, and for you, everything has its price. You give nothing away for free. If silence were golden, I guess no one could sleep, no one could sleep. You have money at your fingertips, people at your beck and call, and you're fools looking for a price. You can have the whole wide world. Hope and dreams, these souls, visions you have never realized. It can't be true. It can't be true. 'Cause you got a big house, you drive a fancy car, so what if your pockets are full with an empty little heart? You snap your fingers and all the waters part. So what if the people bow down as they show you no regard? Your left hand always washes right. So what if you trust in God if you can't sleep at night? You think you made it, you're not what everyone wants. So you're a big fat man who has made a little money off somebody else's sweat. Watch people starve while you got fat, while you got fat, while you got fat, you got fat.
So this song, when we were preparing for this, I was kind of scrambling trying to find, working class tunes or something like that. So I came across a Bruce Springsteen song called, do you all know? Can you guess what I'm gonna sing? It's Factory, a song called Factory. And it's just, kind of like gut-wrenching song about working class person. Mostly, I think it's his dad, that's who he's talking about. But then, when we got together for rehearsal, Kelsey had an idea for another song. And what's the other song?
So this other tune is it's called Millwork, and it's a James Taylor song. And I actually came across this song through the musical that Studs Terkel wrote the book to. And Studs Terkel traveled around the country and he gathered all of these great interviews and wrote a book that it seems that a lot of you are very familiar with. And then grabbed various songs, wrote some of them original for the musical, but also used this wonderful James Taylor tune. And they dovetail together really, really quite nicely. So we're doing a little medley of these two here now. And for those of you who are fans of Studs of Working and of Studs Terkel, there was a revival of this show recently at Lincoln Center, and that was led by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who you might know as the composer of Encanto and Hamilton, right, and Washington in the Heights. And so there's also this whole collection of news stories that was brought into the fold there. So if you weren't familiar, there's been an update and there's new bits to check out in the working category.
Shall we do it?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Granddad was a sailor, and he blew it off the water. My father was a farmer, and I his only daughter. I took up with an old good mill-working man from Massachusetts, who died from too much whiskey, and leave me these three faces to feed.
Early in the morning, factory whistle blows. Ben rises from his bed, puts on his clothes. Man takes his lunch, walks out in the morning light. The work, and just a working life.
Now millwork ain't easy, and millwork ain't hard. Millwork most often is a goddamn awful boring job, and I'm waiting for a daydream to take me to the lunch, so I can have my coffee break, enjoy my sandwich and remember. And it's in my machine for the rest of the morning, for the rest of the afternoon, and the rest of my life.
Through the mansions of fear, through the mansions of pain, I see my daddy walking through those factory gates in the rain. Factory takes his hearing, factory gives him life. The work, and just the working life.
Now my mind begins to wander to the days back on the farm, and I can see my father smiling at me, sewing it on his arm, and I can hear my granddad's stories, all the storms that only he
factory whistle blows. I see my daddy.
Use my body for a tool and I
Just believe it when songs get stuck to your mind.
oh, just praying that
Just
a young girl ought to stand a better chance to work, the working, just the working life. And may I work still, just as long as I am able, and never meet the man whose name is on the label. It's me and my machine for the rest of the morning, for the rest of the afternoon, and the rest of my the working, just the working life. The working, just the working life.
So I was thinking, about songs to sing that are, connected to working class people. I always played this song with a bluegrass group called "Dark as a Dungeon." So this song is a coal miner song. So my guitar does not.
I'll say while you're tuning that when I was in the middle of doing ancestry, hunting and looking online at my genealogy, I didn't think I had any mill work personal relations. I didn't think I came from those people. And I was looking through all these records, and all these records, it starts out as just a document, it's a little bit of information, it's a number, it's a state, it's a street address, and then it starts to become this story, right, the more you dig. And I found an ancestor who not only worked in the mills, but on their death certificate, underneath, the cause of death, it was decapitation by spoon. Can you imagine that? Yeah. And so it really is an honor to be here and to contribute in some small way tonight to this legacy and to sharing these stories that were just wildly, they were so horrific, right? These conditions that we read about, hear about, are completely unimaginable to us and to OSHA compliance. And so many great men and women just gave everything to it, gave their entire lives. And I'll also say that being here, I want to call into the room someone who's still with us and very, an incredible warrior here in Pittsburgh and in Braddock. And that's Sandra Gold Ford, who was working in the mills in Braddock and at J&L Steel, and who was a Black woman, and one of the very few Black women who was working at the mill at the time. And when she became aware that she was taking photographs, she's kind of now she's known for her photography, but she was in the mills taking photographs of these conditions and taking photographs of these people. And she also then started to find her way into the offices and take photographs of the forms that were hiding up the fact that the mill was stealing people's pensions. And so Sandra Gold Ford is still here, alive and well, and with us in Pittsburgh, and I just wanted to have her name out there with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. She wrote, yeah. Sandra, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry about I have to tune.
Sandra Gold Ford and LaToya Ruby Frazier did a really wonderful show a few years back at the Alex Wilson Center, And Latoya Ruby Frazier was also a Braddock resident, born and raised in Braddock, who then went on to take all of these photographs of folks in Flint, in Michigan, while they were suffering through their water crisis, which some folks still are. And they did a really beautiful shared show, and Sandra printed out some of these photographs on these architecture blueprint paper, and they were displayed alongside of Latoya Ruby Frazier's photos of Braddock and of folks in Flint.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Come on, you young fellas, so young and so fine, and seek not your fortune in the dark, dreary mine. Form as a habit, and seep in your soul till your blood runs as black as the coal, where it's dark as a dungeon, damp as the dew, where danger is double, the pleasures are few, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines, and it's dark as a dungeon, way down in the mines. Please sing along. There's many a man I have seen in my day who lived just to labor his whole life away, like a fiend with his dope or a drunkard his wine, and must have lust for the lure of the mine. It's dark as a dungeon, damp as a dew, where the danger is double, and the pleasures are few, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines. It's dark as a dungeon, way down in the mines.
This is my favorite verse.
So I hope when I'm gone and the ages do roll, my body will blacken and turn into coal. I'll look on down from my heavenly home and pity the miner who digs through my bones. And it's dark as a dungeon, damp as a dew, where the danger is double, the pleasures are few, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines. And it's dark as a dungeon, way down in the mine, where it's dark as a dungeon, damp as a dew, where the danger is double, the pleasures are few, where the rain never falls and the sun never shines. It's dark as a dungeon, way down in the mine.
Each poet gets a Reed's Day artifact and can produce the next poem. So we're going to start. Well, first of all, we just got to talk. Does anybody not know any of the poets here? We've got a little program here, but we should say our probably senior poet is Robert Gibb. He's a native of Homestead, and he's been writing about pretty much Homestead all his life, I guess. He has published 13 full-length poetry collections, won numerous major prizes, including 2 fellowships for the National Endowment of the Arts. And I believe, I read somewhere that his grandfather was working here in 1892 at the Homestead Mill. I guess he'll verify that, or maybe it's just part of the folklore that's grown up around him, but there's definitely some roots there. Jason Irwin is the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, 2 chapbooks, most recently The History of Our Vagrancies, published by Main Street Rag Press. He also has won numerous literary prizes. And if you haven't seen the book table up there with the poets' merchandise, go ahead and check it out. Robert Willicke is the person who, again, conceived this gathering tonight, and he sent us a proposal for that. His writing has appeared in over 50 journals, and also I think his latest poetry collection has been published by Main Street Rag Press. And then Paula Corso is the author of 7 poetry and fiction books set in her native Pittsburgh, where
her Southern Italian immigrant family worked in the steel mills. Her poetry and photos about Pittsburgh city steps was published in a volume called Vertical Bridges. And we were very fortunate to have her talk about that book and those steps in a program a couple years ago. It was on Zoom, but now we get to hear her in person. So please welcome Paula Corso.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and the Homestead Foundation. Also, Bob, I'm grateful to be here and honored to be reading with Robert and Jason and Bob. Very, very honored. And I'll tell you what, I am so inspired. If I wasn't jazzed about this reading, I certainly am now after hearing you two sing. Very emotional. Okay, I am going to begin this reading as I do all of mine, and I hope you join me in my Pittsburgh prayer. Please join me. In the name of the Allegheny, and of the Monongahela, and of the Holy Ohio, amen. I'm going to read the title poem to Vertical Bridges. My Pittsburgh childhood, the hills where we lived, the river valley where my Southern Italian immigrant family worked in a steel mill, glass plant, and mirror works along the Allegheny. The river where my friends and I jumped in by swinging on a rope that hung from a tree along the bank. The river where my dad and his siblings were thrown in to learn how to swim or sink. River that floods. Where my great uncle, as a boy, went fishing on high waters one Easter and drowned trying to save his friend. River polluted, bridges to cross. Then came a day I looked up to the hills and saw what's between. Steps. Pittsburgh is a triangle, a confluence of rivers. But my geometric view of the city began to take a different shape. The perpendicular, where horizontal meets vertical. City steps and steps in the city. People climbing them, sitting on them, shoveling and painting them. Steps to admire for their architectural beauty. Steps my grandfather, a stonemason from Sicily, built. Steps my Calabrian grandfather climbed to and from the steel mill. The more I saw, the more I realized what I had overlooked since childhood, what had come to draw my attention, and why. Steps are vertical bridges, and I want to cross them. As connections in the landscape, connections we make with each other, that middle ground where we meet. Okay. And here's a poem called American Future that I read in memory of my father, Mariano Procopio Corso. And this was translated into Italian. I might read a line or two in Italian. Snapshot of my father as a young man, standing at the top of hillside steps, wearing a double-breasted suit and tie, pants creased, shoes polished, his back to the steel mill in the valley behind him, his back to the jackhammer he used to drill on the labor gang. It's 70 pounds to his 145. The crane he operated in a sweaty cabin above a coal-fired furnace. His back to chain-smoking stacks, to chain-smoking beer gardens, to the jackass work he skipped one day. And when his father found out, he belted him before he told his son. Mario, è meglio che tu impari a usare la testa e non le mani. Mario, you better learn to use your head and not your hands. As he wore white collar's vest, striking a pose for the camera, feet anchored on higher ground, my father set his sights ahead. Not a Pittsburgh mill, not his native Calabria or Santa Procopio, the patron saint he was named after for sharing a July 8th birthday. He signed his middle name Paul instead of Procopio. Not the steps he climbed onto a boat crossing the ocean in steerage herds. Steps where his mother led him up by the hand, pushed him through the classroom door each morning because he was a WAP who couldn't speak English, a WAP who flunked his first grade of school. Steps to a job at the mill after high school, running up, jumping down with a lunch bucket swinging from his hand, punching in on time with the rank and file. Steps to a World War II fighter plane as a tail gunner in the Pacific Arena, then to college on the GI Bill, the stage to accept his diploma, to a newspaper office, government office, school administration office, suit and tie office. What was my Italian father thinking as he faced his American future, double-breasted for the camera? What he didn't know, couldn't know. He turned his back on an immigrant past, but his cancer faced front. Centrato il petto morto, centrati I polmoni morto. Dead center front, dead center lungs. Bob, could you let me know when I have 5 minutes left? I've already lost track of time. So, okay, this next one is Crane Dance, and I read this in memory of my grandfather. And there will be a footnote after I read this poem. 1. My grandfather's crane spanning fire, long-necked, long-legged, teething molten bone. He rides with a sweatband above his brow, stroking its mechanical head to drop white, hot ingots into a trolley. He rides its flexion in crackled air to machine through night, shifting night. 2. My grandfather's crane spanning fire, long-necked, long-legged, teething molten bone, as he becomes one of those predictions of science. In my dream, he doesn't die. I fold 1,000 origami cranes, and he rides in a vim of courtship dance. Pairs of birds whisk their wings and vault the air, high above the wintering ground. And the footnote that I refer to with science is the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health did a study on the relationship between steelworkers' exposure to cancer-causing toxins and the mortality rate. And what they found was there was a correlation, and many kinds of cancer, lung cancer, leukemia, etc. My grandfather was a crane operator at a mill in Brackenridge for 47 years before he retired, and he died of leukemia in 1966. Okay, here's a little follow-up to my grandfather and what his sons did for him. It's called A Cigarette Butt on a Landing. Pick it up, toss it in the trash, pretty up city stairs for an annual trek. Years ago, the same camel would have been flipped by a mill hunk, taking the last drag as he climbed down to the factory gate. What did he care about clean steps when he was a sooty shadow of a man after his shift? Pants and shirt, the color of a charcoal sky, the color of factory lines. Now trekkers climb a yellow brick road for views, for snapshots, for exercise, for a lighter carbon footprint when the bottom of his steel-toe boots was black, his soul heavy. Old-timers climbed before they were cool, before they were the destination. They climbed to church and to school, to get a haircut and buy some soda pop. And to a steel worker, steps were the route to punch in and punch out, the route he didn't want to take except on payday. On my grandfather's last night shift operating the crane before he retired, my father and his brothers borrowed a Cadillac and drove him home at sunrise. He wasn't going to climb up those stairs on his last day after 47 years in a sweat cabin above open fire. He came home to a pancake breakfast, to maple syrup, strips of bacon, black coffee. Home, an old destination. Home, a new route. And here's a poem that is written after the Pittsburgh Step Trek. Many of you probably have participated every year. There are routes in which to climb the steps in the South Side. And here's a poem that this is in memory of my Sicilian grandfather, Antonio Calderone. As we climb these steps, look out on our city, ribbons of river, bridges arching their golden spines, duet of valley and hill. As we look out to buildings huddled together, a fountain pluming in the mist, an incline zippering up its track. Remember the immigrant who came here, his chisel and his mallet to build these stairs with concrete fists. Remember him on a steep hill, standing on an edge, the width of his feet, the width of misstep and fall. Standing with his pick, picking away at a glacier of rock, dirt up his nose, dust in his eyes, grit between his teeth. And down his neck, a foreman who brushes his top coat, adjusts his bowler hat, glances at his pocket watch to time lunch. Each step we take, a step in the past, our ancestors, their uncertain futures, we on steady ground. Each step, a step in the future, new immigrants on the way out. And for every step we take, they take 3. 1 forward, 1 backward, 1 waiting. Don't mind, I wanted to run short instead of my time, but I thought I've read all these poems about my grandfather on this side and that side, and my father, and women in my family were factory workers too. And this book has steelworker poems, and it also has poems about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. and I thought I'd read a poem that envisions what would the Triangle workers say today about the continued state of deplorable conditions. And I call them the Triangle Girls. This is girl talk. The Triangle Girls say to the Chinese girls, the Indonesian girls, the Vietnamese, the Taiwanese, girls, take your 16-hour workday and glue it to the sole of your shoe. Take your 20 cents an hour wage and glue it to the heel of the shoe. Take the $180 he charges for the shoe and glue it to the padding of the shoe. And the Triangle Girls say to the Chinese girls, the Taiwanese girls, the Indonesian, the Vietnamese, girls, take the room with 6 bunk beds and no place to stand and glue it to the arch of the shoe. Take the glue, toxic glue, burning eyes, ringing ears, bleeding nose, and glue it to the tongue of the shoe. Take the fans and vents you don't have, gloves, masks, aprons you don't wear, and glue them to the threads of the shoe. And the Triangle Girls say to the Chinese girls, the Indonesian girls, the Vietnamese, the Taiwanese, girls, take the chopsticks you can't hold at lunch because your fingers are too numb and glue them to the Velcro of the shoe. Take the vertigo, headaches, vomiting, memory loss, shortness of breath, the cancer, and glue it to the glue of the shoe. Take the glue, toxic glue, and put it under his nose. A Nike nose, an anything goes nose, and make him sniff. In factories, recently, and these conditions continue. And she tried to get some reform with the vents and the fans and all of that, and they would have none of it. There was no union there. So I'm going to introduce now Bob Licky, who will be next. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and braving this storm. Really appreciate it. Kelsey, Dan, wonderful. Thank you, Lawrence, for having us. So, in addition to being a poet, I've also worked most of my adult life in the construction fields and worked as a plumber most recently. So, I'm going to lead off with a couple of those poems and speak to those experiences. This is called Real Men. Real men say it loud in a huff, shoot off their mouths and heavy guns, drag bloody deer, leave their hearts on the ground. Real men roll their sleeves up, a handful of chips, edge of a mouth dripping with sauce, give you shit. Real men screw toolboxes down floors, lock rocks in your hubcaps, lock you in porta-johns, tip them over. Real men call you sissy and bitch, quick as a fist bump, a punch in the gut and break. Say, I thought you'd done this before. Water break, gas leak, jackhammer between your balls in some grandma's basement. Say this breaking is necessary, flaking concrete, ears and shoulder burning. So when the ground opens, grab a shovel. Get down on your knees. Keep moving as if this is your religion, your hands, the cuts and blood. The men standing above you in hard hats, laughing. Every man you've ever met resembles the father you couldn't The Father, heavy as the shadows that fall over you, 6 feet of leaning earth, this ditch line, crumbling into the shape of a body, your body, learning. This next poem is from a collection published by a gentleman in the back. Nathan, this is for you. Black Angel. Because I refuse to listen. Because the words college and textbook fell off my body like indifferent rain, I became a raven. Or more accurately, one of those men, head down, shiny black raincoat, hands made of mud, digging out some broken drain. Instead of wings, ravens like this get stormwater. They get 6 hours of shit-filled pipe overflowing, followed by. I wasn't on the job when the sprinkler fitter stepped wrong, missed the bar on his scissor lift, fell 50 foot down. Because he didn't know about the no-wing policy at job sites. Because they issued us free lunch and Budweiser instead of harness. Canvas straps for our working class lives. We sat on our hands at the safety meetings. My invisible wings, the only things moving. I could leave now, but we ravens, we're short-range flyers. We can spot a quarter on a sidewalk as if it were a drop of blood 50 foot up. Because we need the dead as much as the ground does, to fill our hunger, paychecks folded into our dirty hands every Monday like a drug, so we wouldn't spend everything, so we would always come back. General said, there's a certain type of man wants to fit pipe, set shitters, tear down walls, remove asbestos without a mask. WebMD says it lies inside the body as in dormant, as in 20 to 30 years, as in if I were holding a bullet, mesothelium in the palm of each hand, which one would I put first? I saw the black angel of death walk outside a condemned building, hole in his respirator, cigarette hanging from his mouth. He was just going outside for some fresh air. Beautiful day, he said. One more of these word poems, and then I'm going to move on to some other things. So I originally wasn't, all this paper shifting, I originally wasn't going to read this poem, but I started thinking about people that I know that have worked in mills, and I knew one, and he passed away recently, and this is for him. It's called Aftermath. For Bill Morvenka, worked in Braddock. We never saw it until later, in the face of your friend's father, who rolled steel in the molten hells of Braddock. How could we know he would take the mill with him into his lungs? His hunched back, racked hands, become a version of himself no one would ever recognize. I saw it again at the job, watching steelworkers climb the skeletons of buildings in the wet smell of rust, and winters glazed with ice and twine. In January 1996, it was Bushy from Plumbers Local 27. Our jeaned bodies reaching into the air for a pipe. Our lives reveal me as much as the safety strap, the latch I checked twice. I didn't know this was all about structure, about surety, about everything we gave our bodies to except for what mattered. About how we leave it there in the pieces of beams buried in the mud, in the half-excavated earth, the cracked pipes, the cutoffs, the layoffs, an empty pack of marble lights. A year later, it was my father's face, blessed by the basement lights from the cigarettes he hid, blowing away the years he spent selling furniture for that soulless department store. How many ways can you name the broken? You never took a moment to tell him how you felt about him. That someday you would carry that same weight, unspoken. Would you see in your dead lunch pail, your dirty work pants, and you take it to bed with you, and you wear it the next day and the next, and you won't speak of it until now, and even then. A lot of these poems about my own experiences, and a few years ago, I was in Florida, and for a brief moment, I saw these workers in these fields picking oranges. So I did a little research on how a field worker's day goes and wrote this poem called Keys. 160 miles between pavements and blossom. 6 exits from flight 229 leaving Tampa, past the firewheel blanket flowers and inlets fingering the flattened rush. Gray highways bursting with roadside palms, fruit trucks splitting the wind and carrying crates of guava, pineapple, heirloom, in the sweat of field workers, hands over the eyes of the sons of Bradenton, Arcadia, Coreopsis bursting lava from the roadside beautification program. Dovetail leaves the shade of sun-washed celery, wrens, grackles, and the average birds of a hidden life, of singing in the empty. Windows down, I'm waiting in the light in the morning heat of the turnoff of the tomato fields of Moku. Thinking of the heavy barrels of reds and greens, shoulder busheled and spilling into the truck beds as the men yell pendejo or cabron at each other, asshole and bastard laughing. We pull out under a raw under sky while small engines roar overhead, low enough to spread eagle the field workers in shade. A sheen of rain spitting its pesticides down over their heads, over their endless reaching and bending. But lift off, the palm trees are already growing smaller under the plane's wing. Highways become small gray tongues as I pull up the article chronicling a day in the life of a tomato worker. 4:30 a.m., prepare lunch in their trailer. 5, walk to the pickup lots and wait for work. 6 a.m., take converted school bus ride to the fields and wait for the dew to lift. Don't touch anything. Remember, you haven't been paid yet for any of this. 9, start picking. Each bushel is 32 pounds, 50 cents worth of wages or more, depending on the speed of your picking. 12 p.m., eat fast with your hands soaked in pesticide. Return to that smoldering sun, burning the rest of your minimum wage day down. 5 to 8. Wait in the pull-off for the lights, for the school bus to arrive. Take the nameless road there and drive. Stir gravel dust into the air like a prayer. 9. Get out in the dark. Walk the rest of the way home. Shifting gears a little bit, I started thinking about what does working class mean? What does blue collar mean? And for me, it means so much more than work. It spills into our lives, and the people we love and what we do. So these next few poems reflect that mindset. The title of this next poem is called Pascha, and Pascha comes from the Greek word meaning Easter. And it's also a recipe for the perfect deviled egg. Almost Easter, which means it's time to wake. For slow 6 a.m. hands cracked like eggs. I mean the ones we hard-boiled last night, peeling shells from their swollen inner bodies. I feel like I'm moving too careful, as if I'm handling a new baby, careful not to injure its skin. I love to hold those clammy clothes and slice them in the perfect halves, pour out the cold yolks like little frozen suns from them. We work together, quiet, like twin surgeons, living only for a higher purpose, for the rising sun of life. It feels too late for everything, for these birds, for the pains in both of our bodies attacking us like little hidden armies whispering, take it easy, you've had a hard week. We don't think we killed anything that could have had wings. Besides, there's more to be upset over in this broken world, in our unfixable bodies. Come here, I want to say, taste this. Here's a spoonful of mayo, a knife's length of mustard. Enough eggs whipped into the shade of spinning suns. You dress those eggs. I'll squeeze out perfect portions. Somewhere in the bend of your elbow where our pear tree's wind-ripped branches say you survived. Tell me about your hunger, and I'll fill it. Fresh scallions, meadow green, ham honeyed sweet and thick with salt. I'll render the fats, turn the heat up, set the boil rolling, leave it simmering for hours. I'm sure that I have so much water in my poems because we were almost flooded out last week in this. So, empty. Our storm-wrecked pear is blossoming. Even after last week's thunderstorm toward a new one. Though not so much the pollen. The one we drained down until it was nothing but man-made mud and glued down stone. Nooks tucked in with spray foam. The mottled glum colors of last season's leaves, coal black, salamander green, sunset yellow. We bail out the brown water, steady and intent, as if it were money for gold. I handing you the bucket, you dumping it unceremoniously in the bright grass. There's something about emptying that always gets to me, that getting down to the bottom of it. The black ripple of the liner glazed and hollow, like the undersides of the horseshoe crabs, shorebound, slack with light. The ones from September, from Ocean City, the ones I told you look like the helmets of soldiers, turned up and empty. Soon the finches will return, if I remember to fill their house. And then they'll spill it back out again, let down their confetti of seeds, careless as teenagers. Maybe then there's something we don't about plenty and fulfillment. There's something I'm not getting here. Some message stuffed in the gutters along with every wet dead leaf and tree branch, every empty chip bag and pill bottle by the dollar store I trip over. Why do I mourn for something I haven't lost? Somewhere in me, the tree holds the answer. The freak storm that ripped her 15-foot arms out, broken branches in the backyard like a war zone. It doesn't matter. In 2 years, its jagged wound will grow over, the hollowing filled as if it never was. Grief. Grief can overtake you, but grief isn't you. Let's stand here for a while in the kitchen and watch it. Let the lattes warm our hands and stare upon from this side of the window, still empty, but with you. Forget the hose. Don't fill it up. You say, come closer to me, just leave it like that for a while. We'll wait for the rain. And I think I'll end on one of those poems about kind of growing up and just noticing the things that give our life meaning. This is called The Everyday, and it has an epigraph from the poet Marie Howe, which is, this is the everyday we spoke of. The days of our maple are over. The backyard, a brush fire of golden stars, leaves palm big, fisting into wrinkles of pink orange, sugar red. Veined and lined like my grandmother's hands, roadmaps to a life of labor. Of afternoon fingers greased with blood as she reached inside a car to rip out innards in gut string, a rock-sized frozen heart. Stuff it with celery, sweet onion, wet salt, torn up sourdough and day-old rye. Colder days should leave the oven open for heat. Her living room growing warm and buttery with stuffing, and air so wild you could taste it. Somewhere near Butler Street in a goat hill, her house had stopped burning. No one knew how it started, though everything now is hill and aftermath. Broken beer bottles and needles. An afterthought of grass rehabbing the weeds and shrapnel of her back patio and gravel. Spilling down into a river the color of distance and slow memory. Of 30 years and so many burning sunsets in 1983 that swallowed us whole and kept us alive. When the streets were littered only with working class kids like us, trading hits from the one blunt that saved us, lifting us above the A&P, above the rooftops of our row house lives, above the crows drifting and banking, heading somewhere towards Allegheny Cemetery. Say it's November. Say it's been a life you've always wanted. One you hold on to with such reckless desperation that the sounds of kids on bikes passing your bedroom window are enough to break you into bursting. You are alive, and no one you know is dying. And daylight will break like a fever again and again, like yesterday, over the tomatoes softening in your window, over top your backyard maple late with leaves, even waiting in line at the drive-through pharmacy, or on your way home when the 6 p.m. sun was so bright you needed sunglasses. Don't say it. Just remember, you are here for this. Thank you. Another one of my favorite poets, Jason Irwin.
Hello. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, Bob, for inviting me. Lawrence. First poem is called Smoke Rising. To see it as my grandfather saw it when he was a man my age meant hope, food on the table, a shield against those horrors no one would speak of, afflictions passed down, locked away in attics and basements, money owed, alcoholism, infidelity, insanity, or a crippled child. Back then, to see dark clouds of smoke rising above the housetops meant that God, in his wisdom and mercy, was still on our side. To see smoke rising meant that the factories, those benevolent monstrosities that dictate time and identity, were open. That iron ore was being transformed into steel. And so our dreams, far flung as our faith, had not yet turned to rust. I worked at grocery stores in my early 20s, and this is a poem about that. It's called At the Grocery. Between produce and discounted bread, a man shoves oranges into his pockets. I want to tell him, take some apples too, a banana, avocado, a 6-pack, anything that will help him through another day. Tell all the hungry to come and feast, to feed them like Jesus fed them in the Gospels. Instead, I walked to the deli, past Betsy, up to her elbows in potato salad, famous for her Christmas party striptease. In the break room, Tommy sits, mop at his side, legs crossed, boot atop steel-toed boot, going bald, alcoholic, thumbing through a newspaper he can't read. What's up, he asks, as I sit down, eye the clock, 4:15, 15 minutes before I punch out and he punches in. Not much, I reply, and notice a pallet of canned foods waiting to be stocked and think how I've worked at this job for 1 year and 6 months, too long, and think how my father and grandfather worked, of all the dreams they must have swallowed to put food on the table, pay the mortgage, and no, I'm not that faithful or strong. This is called My Father Asks Me to Go to Church, and it's also the first line of the poem. My father asks me to go to church and write the hymn numbers on a sheet of yellow paper. He read about a woman in Michigan who won the Powerball this way. I take the paper and imagine the heavenly choir who will raise their voices when he's handed $1 million check. Remember those Sunday mornings when I was a child, how I held his hand as he knelt in front of the television, while the preacher in a 3-piece suit told us to expect a miracle. Now, years later, we drive down to the lake and watch the waves crash into the break wall. The only thing on TV are repeats my father's seen 100 times. Murder, She Wrote, A Fistful of Dollars, Monk. Most days, he spends alone with his papers and pills, anti-aging remedies, and notebooks filled with lottery numbers, his own troubled alchemy. I want to tell him about Emily Dickinson and the cup of coffee I drank this morning while watching the rain. Little miracles that occur every day. But he still expects a cosmic transformation, a new soundtrack that will reinvent his life in ways neither of us can comprehend. This poem goes out to my buddy Scott Silsby. It's called Codgers. At countertops, crumbs strewn and greasy, on broken down swivel chairs and at roadside diners, where the waitress is always named Pearl or Doll, they loiter. Coffee growing cold in their almost clean mugs, runny eggs, and burnt sausages lying on their plates. Pencils stand at attention in their breast pockets. Tape measures or knives cling to their belts. Always together, always alone. They sit and watch the day run its course, grumbling, cursing, commiserating, bellowing their eternal complaint on the life that could have been, how time is killing them. Do they know their faces are still growing? That the crows in the tree are mindful of their comings and goings, the hats they wear? That only dirt endures? The one on the far right has a boxer's nose and hair like steel wire. The one in the middle is limp as a scarecrow, while the old man on the left, sporting a cap that reads Hawaii, has a dreamy left eye. In moments of silence, they gaze out the window at the ruins of this company town, where the sun-baked blacktop goes on forever, where buildings of brick and glass stand like tombstones, while the river and hills beyond, I can't see. Sorry. While the rivers and hills behind hint at a promise they've long since believing in. Forgive us our anger, they say, that swells and rises like the sea. It is only fear and weariness in disguise. This is a short prose piece. In my mid-20s, I wanted to prove to my grandfather that I could actually do factory work and failed. And so this is about that. It's called Shiftless. It's also inspired by a poem by the same name by Raymond Carver. Shiftless. He doesn't want to work. He just wants to get drunk and grow his hair long. I could hear my grandfather's mocking voice as I stood beneath the rusted ass of the machine that roared and spit cranberry residue at my feet. It was the end of summer. It was my first day on the job at the juice factory. I was 26, back living with my mother after a cross-country road trip. A one-sided love affair with a hippie woman and her dog that ended in drunken disgrace when we settled in with her stunt pilot boyfriend in a San Fernando bungalow, and I realized I was the third wheel. 3 hours into the shift, with blisters blooming on my hands like stigmata, a man with a toothpick between his lips and an Ewok's beard tapped me on the back and motioned with a greasy thumb. Break time. I followed them through the maze of metalwork and fruit slop. The noise was horrendous, the heat devouring. I felt like I'd been plunged into the depths of William Blake's satanic furnaces. I thought about Friday, when I'd go with my grandfather to the Knights of Columbus for fish and beer. After we ate our fill, I'd drive him around town in his red Pontiac. We'd stop at the pharmacy and the grocery store. All the while, he'd point out the empty lots that used to be something. A barber shop, the church where he and my Nana were married, and the steel mill where he worked for 40 years. Outside the factory, a soggy breeze hung in the air like bad breath. The sun had slid west, hanging just above the smokestacks of Niagara Mohawk. I stood in the parking lot, watching 2 men in blue jumpsuits smoke cigarettes. One of them gesticulating as he spoke something I could not understand. When the break was over, I decided not to go back. Screw this, I said, and walked across the parking lot, kicking bits of gravel in my path. At the corner of Central and 2nd, I turned left, meandered along the lakefront, seagulls screaming overhead. In the distance, a boat silhouette rose above the horizon line. He doesn't want to work, my grandfather's voice taunted. And maybe he was right. Maybe all I wanted to do was study the clouds or the cracks in the sidewalk, to drink cheap beer and read Camus, and dream of all the places I'd yet to travel to. Thanks. This is a poem about my hometown of Dunkirk, New York, and a lot of images are taken from a book called Out of the Wilderness, about the history of Dunkirk, which was like a miniature Pittsburgh, the history of our vagrancies. Out of Paris in Oneida, in an ox-driven sleigh to New Amsterdam, across the frozen waters to a tiny creek-bed cabin surrounded by sycamore and shale. From the land of the Seneca to Canada Way and Chadwick's Bay. From a man named Smith to disaster and resurrection. The war over salt and the Panic of 37. Look how far we've come. From the locomotive yards to the steel mills. From a house divided to the doctor will see you now. the Masons, Unitarians, and plutocrats, Garibaldi and the Candlemaker, migrant farm workers and grocers, from Kid Sperry's and Pop Tyrrell's to the Sacred Heart, the Knights of Columbus and Maccabees, the Monis and Black Community Club, from the Peanut Cafe to the Family Dollar, frontier town to vacant lot. On sleepless nights, we hear their song, their voices calling us back. Allegheny Ludlam, Niagara Mohawk, and Cook's Brewery. The tugboats and fisheries, pesticides and the grape harvest, King Neptune and the county fair. From D-Day to Victory Day, Eisenhower and JFK. To the false prophets of urban renewal, the Merchants Bank and the Friendly Kitchen, Spaghetti Sundays and the cancer ward. Listen to their song, like a blast of wind from Ontario, like the waves that lap the beach. Liverwurst, TV dinners, and grilled cheese. From Love Me Tender to Ave Maria. Coffee in the morning, and I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Holy Thursday and the 4th of July. Like a rhythm that swells from the ground and shoots up into your boots. Like cicadas in August. Like the song the dead sing, or the cry of a newborn. Listen as they call to us, like all our vagrancies, the history of our comings and goings, the doubts that invade our greatest aspirations and propel our return. Welcome home, I say. Welcome home, and don't come back. This is called Visiting Day. It's for my best friend growing up, Joe Ranka. Today is his 53rd birthday.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Visiting Day. In the back of the sunlit room, a CO stands with a Polaroid, taking pictures of inmates and their loved ones as they pose in front of a pull-down screen with scenes of Paris or some tropical paradise. Anywhere but here, the visiting room, upstate, medium security, 2 days after Christmas. It's crowded, full of laughter and celebration. People playing Scrabble, buying sandwiches, soda pop, and candy bars from vending machines. A woman in a tight yellow top struts across the room, lips red as blood. A man alone at a table near the window sits with head in hands. Joe and I face each other at table 3-7. In for 2 to 6 for breaking parole, possession, and sale. He spent the better part of the last 26 years in facilities not unlike this one. Unable or unwilling to surrender to the demands of life from the outside. But we don't dwell on mistakes and regrets. In our mid-40s, our lives, for better or worse, are full of things we wish we hadn't done. Instead, he brags about his son, a straight-A student and a pretty good bowler. Nearing 13, we laugh, joke around, talk shit, remember, make plans. Happy for these moments together, forgetting for a time the armed guards, the razor wire, the chain link fence. Our last poem is called The House Sparrow. Walking home from the post office, I found the severed head of a house sparrow lying on the sidewalk. A speck of blood adorned its feathered cheek like a jewel. A swarm of ants moved in and out of its beak and eyes, like parishioners entering and exiting the temple of some ancient avian god. Not knowing why, I scooped the head into my right hand and for several blocks carried it like a coin or talisman. What did I hope to gain from carrying the severed head of a house sparrow? If it could speak to me, one creature of the earth to another, would it admit that, like man, it has been known to invade and conquer the weaker of its species? Would it expound on its love for butterflies, primroses, the symphonies of Mahler? Or would the house sparrow tell me that the things we hold on to, severed heads, coins, the belief in our own dominion, are nothing more than fistfuls of wind?
When I got hired, I thought they made a mistake when I got home because I looked at the work slip and it said I started on Sunday night at midnight. And I thought, that can't be right. Nobody works. At that time, we didn't work at 8 in the morning. It was the first of many wake-ups. Still astonished to be starting work at 12 o'clock at night. I passed through the dark streets by the river that first Sunday in another life, carrying my lunchbox and steel-toed shoes toward those enormous ovens I'd been laboring beneath till morning. Left alone below the mill floor, I shoveled shale into the waters rushing beyond me like an open main, and could hear above me the sheer and clamor of bells, crane whistles, ingots thundering along their beds to be rolled through a series of presses. I learned that day how time ran in the gears and drive trains of machinery, how time burned inside furnaces, the great fires of creation, and spread out evenly in sheets of steel. That night, for the first time, I counted the hours coming on, one by one, and passed through them without sleep. Finally, that morning, I watched the sun bloom in the sky, filled with mill smoke and sparrows rising from their beds of dust. The blue fuse of ozone from the wires above the trolleys. I learned how each new day was a promise light made to dust before breaking, which the river took with it and emptied downstream. How the streets were a promise and the surge of current through the line, the song of the blood, the humming wires would take up again with each new morning, just as though it were the first. We're having fun poems. This is a first poem from a longer sequence called Magnetic North, and it kind of picks up the night imagery. Growing up, when we came across what used to be the high-level bridge, you see the mills were all on fire. It's an astonishing kind of thing to see as a child. With no sense that's where you were like that. The scale of the machine those days, hard above us like the sky. One well, and then another with fire poured in the shapes. Great sheds, vast as hangars, placed end to end, frames and rigging of their girders. 3 miles of the river, 3 shifts in which to raise up a leviathan daily from tons of battered earth. Common labor for a millwright, you could feel heat shimmering in your face 20 feet from the ovens. See loose flakes dancing upon the backs of slabs. You could watch as almost molten metal was being rolled into finished lengths of plate. Everything there fed the flames, except what came bursting from them. Night sky glittering like a coal seam, blast furnaces and open hearts lowering through clouds of smoke. Metal from heaven, the Sumerians called iron, meteoric, fallen to earth. In Homestead, it was ore, oxides or salts of the metal, or sintered out of pig. It was steel, and we had carbon, and we're ready to tap the heat. Is it another night? All right. This is from another sequence. I guess the night stuff stayed with me because it was so. Nights is our dreams and sleep and all kind of things that take you to such an essential, living kind of place that then to be displaced from that and placed to another kind of night state stays with you. When I first started, I was working for a labor gang. So you got all the kind of grungy jobs that nobody else higher up on the hierarchies wanted or needed to do. So with the labor gang, you get in you change clothes in the locker room and you come out, and then you had an orange hard hat, and then the guy that had the white hard hat, like in Westerns, the guy with the white hat was the guy you had to pay attention to, and he would come and he would read out your orders for what you're going to do for the next 8 or sometimes 12 hours. Night after night, the man with the white hat and all the pens calls out names and accidents from the preceding shifts, chants up cuts and bruises, broken bones, lost fingers, and how to hold on to our own on the jobs he is sending us to. We gather up tools, the hands of our gloves, move to our labors among shale heaps and oil, brine, and sheet metal, to the 9-rung ladders of hell, under furnaces, shoveling in flues and tunnels where water seeps like wells. Lathes drop their spinnings, ovens and coal bins in great house of night, the bellies of machines which never sleep, but sing through their gears like the heavens. Tonight, as usual, evenings flared like a slag heap down the rim of the sky. Mills cast their sunsets on the waters, and we are entering the oven, tearing a wall of fire bricks out of number 4's 120-degree depths. As long as we can bear it, we hurl crowbars at a wall blank as the face of a whale, rush back out for salt and water to put out our feet, and sit clothed by something other than flames. Cooled off, we re-enter that kingdom of heat, where the soles of our shoes start to smolder. Shirts flower with holes like small dark stars. until finally we are walking on fire as if born to it, burning by our own bodies, the candles of the spine. Even outside we can smell it, sitting exhausted and smoking in the last blue of heaven, the color of steel. All right, this is a poem. I read a couple sections from it, they're not that long, so I guess I'll just finish up with this. This is a poem called The Employments of Time in Homestead, and it was written after I came back, after being out of Pittsburgh, Homestead for a number of years. I got back just in time to see everything being torn down. Lucky me. So the mills are being torn, the last of it. In fact, I was driving across what used to be the high-level bridge one morning when the wrecking ball slammed into the last couple of buildings that were right against the bridge. So it was the end of that. Kyoto's was still, they're lost. Kyoto's was still there. Which is where I'll pick up this sequence. And in Kyoto, there's a lot of steelworkers, some retired and some just displaced. Because Fridays still mark the end of the week, whether there's work or not, I head across the river to Kyoto to listen to lives whose dreams for the future fall to next year's teams. They waited here for years for the mills to catch fire again, stacks massed like burning pillars, for the sooty angels to ascend again into the furnaces of heaven. Waited for the billowings of smoke from which a still voice told them the dust had turned pollen, the iron been converted to steel. There where slag heaps spilled their sunsets from the lit rim of the world. Today, for my birthday, my son gives me the 8 stapled pages of the book he's made, in which the boy plays baseball and the father falls down, sweaty and tired, at the end of the day of work. Shall I tell him about the laid-off hosts I've sat with, who would gladly collapse onto their bar stools, rinsing the grit of metal from their throats at the end of an 8-hour shift? Or that I found the only friend I grew up with who is still in town, and how laboring from Mesta until it closed, he spent the next 10 years replacing windshields, too bitter to have sons of his own. In a world where work is sacramental, shall I tell him how, on those immense nights before inspection, I swept the mill floor clean with powdered cement, 8 hours at union scale, sowing that pale, flowery chaff until the floor shone softly as a granary's, or the milky surface of a milk pond in which the moon was down. And how I paused, leaning on my broom as if it were a pole, and what loomed above me wasn't simply furnaces, but the actual machinery of heaven, and whose glory we were all employed. Thank you.